Hi guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I hope you're okay, happy, healthy, doing the things that you love with the people that you love doing them with. Please hit the like button for me, hit the subscribe button for me, hit the notification bell, and of course drop a comment on today's video. To not waste any more of your time, I'm going to get straight into it. This video is not about yesterday's game. This video is about takeover news at Tottenham Hotspur. Straight from the Financial Times this morning. These guys don't mess around with clickbaits. Their audience is all about truth. It's about as little speculation as possible. It's about getting things right, not necessarily being first. However, in this case, they could be both, because this has only dropped on the Financial Times. This hasn't been shared with a million aggregators, although obviously by now it's being talked about everywhere else. Let's go through it. Iranian-American billionaire Jar Najafi is preparing a blockbuster $3.75 billion takeover bid for Tottenham Hotspur. Najafi, who is the chair of MSP Sports Capital, is working with a consortium of investors to structure the bid, and is weeks away from formally approaching Spurs owner Joe Lewis and the football club's chairman Daniel Levy, according to these sources. The Najafi and MSP-led offer would value the club's equity at approximately $3 billion, before adding about $750 million of debt on the club's books. The bid is structured so that MSP and its partners will put forward 70% of the purchase price, while backers from the Gulf, mainly from Abu Dhabi, will contribute the remaining 30%. A takeover of Spurs could mean it spends more to challenge for the Premier League and other trophies. ENIC, a vehicle connected to Bahamas-based billionaire Joe Lewis and chairman Daniel Levy, bought into the Spurs in 2000, buying a 26% stake from Lord Alan Sugar for 22 million quid. Its ownership has been praised for shrewd financial management, blah, 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 been criticised for lack of trophies, blah, 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 blah. The Najari-led group interest in the football club extends to real estate and development rights that are available through its ownership, one of the people said. Spurs have played in a new stadium that can host NFL, rugby and music events in a move to reduce reliance on football for income. As global interest has soared in the Premier League, some long-standing owners have started considering an exit. The Glazer family want out of United. Liverpool's Fenway Sports Group are also looking at a sale. Najafi, until recently, was a minority shareholder in the National Basketball Association's Phoenix Suns, which was acquired in a $4 billion deal in December. So he's moved out of NBA. He wants to move into football. He's looking at Tottenham. Let's talk about this from a numbers perspective. So when it says the Najafi and MSP-led offer would value the club's equity at approximately $3 billion before adding about $750 million of debt on the club's books, that could be taken one of two ways. It could either mean that they're just going to pay $3 billion if it's accepted and let Lewis and Levy walk off in the sunset, and they'll pay off the debt that exists on the club for the stadium. Or it could mean that they pay off the debt and then add their own debt onto the stadium or onto the club, which might be at different interest rates. Don't know. There's no details, but the wording on that one's a little bit strange. I'd imagine it's the former, but you can't necessarily write off the latter. It also says 70% from MSP and its partners and 30% from Abu Dhabi. Why 30% from Abu Dhabi? If you remember before, we were talking about QSI, the Qatari Sports Investment Group, and they are not allowed to have anything more than a 30% ownership in any other football club, which will be classed as the maximum minority ownership you can have, because they own Paris Saint-Germain. Potentially, this Abu Dhabi group are already owners of another football club. Again, speculating, there's nothing to go on here, so I'm just talking, spitballing with you. So I could get loads of this bits and pieces wrong, but we'll continue. So who is MSP, right? 70% ownership of MSP, led by this guy Najafi. Well, as far as I'm aware, this guy Najafi has about a personal wealth of about 3.5 billion. But as with all this stuff, none of that stuff really comes into play. He's going to be utilising and leveraging other investment means to fund this money through his consortia. But he does have a little bit of form, a little bit of history in sports ownership, I looked at their website, MSP, and they are investors and partners of, and investors in, several different sports franchises. You've got the McLaren Formula One team, very successful in that end. You've got the X Games, like the motocross, the motorbike stuff they do, in the summer. They also have the Winter X Games where they're snowboarding and stuff. Really cool, very popular kind of alternative sports, I guess you'd call it. And then when it comes to their experience in football, here's where it's a little bit interesting. As far as I can tell, their interests are in a few different leagues. They've got a team called FC Augsburg in the Bundesliga. I'll be honest, I've never even heard of them. A team called SK Beveren in the Belgium League. I'll be honest, I haven't even heard of them. Then another team called Estoril Praia. Never heard of them. I think they're in the Spanish League. And then another team called Deportivo Alcorcón or Alcorcán. I don't know how you pronounce the last part of that name. And I'll be honest, never even heard of them. I looked them up, and the stadium, for example, the biggest stadium capacity of any of those teams is like 30,000. So, I guess that's a large-ish stadium size. And then other ones are down as low as 6,000 and 4,000 seaters. So I don't know if they've just been like testing the water, dipping their toe in the football world with these smaller investments, or whether they're feeder clubs, that go up through each other's, networks to be able to help the biggest team at the top end of it. I don't know. We don't know much about it right now. It's still too early days. And I literally just read the article, came out and got the dog walkings going on. So we will pick this apart maybe later on a stream. I'd also say, guys, that they probably don't have majority investments in any of those football clubs, because if they do, then I don't think they could have a majority investment in Tottenham, because of course the same thing would apply as it would have done with QSI and Paris Saint-Germain, that if any of those clubs were to make it into Europe and there was a chance that Tottenham could meet them, then there'd be a conflict of interest if there was majority owners of both teams playing in the same competition. So I'd imagine that they're minority owners, but we'll figure it out as we go along. What about the valuation? 3.75 billion. I mentioned that the debt thing is a little bit odd, but let's go with the former and just say that they're paying 3 billion to Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy, and they sail off into the sunset, and the 750 is just clean to pay off the debt. Well, first and foremost, if that is true and then there's no more debt on the club, that's a great thing. I don't know what the structure of any of these how they would find the 3 billion would come from, whether that comes from any kind of leverage. If it does, then I'm dead set against it immediately, because as I've said to you before on this channel, leverage debt works in the correct market, correct environment. I don't think the correct environment is right now. The volatility in debt markets and interest markets, the volatility of recent history with regards to the currency between the two nations is too volatile for me. So it's it's not the right time for that kind of investment, in my opinion, but we'll see. In terms of like the actual price though, would Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy be accepting of $3 billion? Well, they didn't put very much in at the start, did they? And they've, will walk away with a ridiculously healthy return on investment if and when this does go through at that price point. But we know that Lewis and Levy would like to get as much juice out of the squeeze as they possibly can. And if that number 3 billion had a pound sign in front of it rather than a dollar sign, then I think that that's probably fair value. And the reason why I say that is, so I spoke to you guys when the financial results came out. But before then, if you remember, I was talking to you a lot about the £150 million investment, the cash injection from last summer. And it didn't look right to me. I always said it was weird that they would get a maximum diluted increase in their ownership. A dilution to the minority shareholders, and ENIC would increase their ownership by 2%, give or take. Which simple rudimentary maths values the business, the overall club, at £7 billion. Which, to me, doesn't make any sense, because there's no way the club is valued at that. So I was always a bit weird, like why would they pay so much money, or why would they put that money in at that valuation? Why not get 4 or 5% dilution, which makes a lot more sense in terms of fair valuation of the market cap. In the financial reports that came out on Friday, And I mentioned this, I think I mentioned it on Saba's show on Sunday. They mentioned the £150 million, and they mentioned that they've taken 100 of it, and they plan to take another 50. They've extended the deadline of that until I think the end of this year, end of the financial year in June. But it also goes a little bit further into defining the difference between the warrants and the options and the extension, and how long that new deadline lasts for, and what actually happens over time. And I could be wrong about this, because it's very complicated the way it's written. I could be wrong, but I think actually it reads as though that dilution for the full 150 million increases over time to a maximum of 5%. And that would therefore value the business at £3 billion, which is far more realistic, far more fair, and far more balanced, in my opinion, with regard what's going on at Tottenham and relative to other, similar businesses that have had their own valuations recently, like Chelsea, for example. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Manchester United. They have, I think, until the end of this week for any potential bidder who wants to express an interest, to make a formal application. So we'll see at the end of, I think it's the end of this week, it might be the end of next week, we'll see that list of suitors, whether it's 10 people, 10 consortiums, or whether it's 100 who are all interested in putting in a bid. And we'll see, I guess we'll start to see what sort of price that they'll be valued at. And they have to make that stuff public because Manchester United is listed on the stock exchange. So we'll get to see what Man United's valuations are, versus, and then from there you can make kind of, I guess, your judgment calls on what Tottenham are valued at. But back to the point in question, if the club is valued at £3 billion, would $3 billion be enough? Maybe not. Maybe if they came in with a bid of 3.75 billion that paid off the debt and gave them the 3 billion, I reckon they'd come back with a counter and say 4.25, because they'll want 3.5 billion themselves, which would be about £3 billion in net, when the currencies are equated out, and maybe they'll meet in the middle at $4 billion. We shall see. Do I want this guy? Do I want any of these guys? Guys, I don't know anything about this guy, to be honest. I don't know anything about him. I don't know if he's risk averse or whether he's pro-risk. They've mentioned that they're interested in the property. If the people that are moaning about ENIC now building golf courses and cinemas and hotels, even though, as far as I see it, that has absolutely nothing to do with Tottenham Hotspur. You never see anything mentioned on any Tottenham Hotspur financial accounts, anything about any golf courses or revenue or income streams from any of those things, or the costs associated with building those things. So I don't know why people focus on that stuff, but that's for another conversation. But if they were to come in and buy that stuff out as well, are you going to be happy with the next owner coming in and doing those same sort of things? We'll find out. Listen, as long as the club is in the hands of someone that is going to keep it sustainable, that is going to protect us from any, ridiculous volatile situations, and at the same time have a better approach to risk, be able to get deals done quicker, be able to hit the asking price, and more importantly than any of that stuff, to be able to put in place the correct structures in the football club that can identify the right talent early, that can develop the right talent faster, and that can generate better, consistent styles of football that also lead to success. If all of those things are moving in the right direction, I'm all for it, but it will be conditional to what the terms of the trade look like and whether or not there's all sorts of debt leveraged onto the assets of the football club. We don't know any of that detail yet, so I can't go into any more about it. Let me know your thoughts, guys. It's really interesting. Are you over the moon? Are you happy? Maybe if you guys know anything about this fella, let me know. Right? I can't find too much out about him. Let me know and we'll talk about this on a live stream. Bugsy, shut up! She's saying, it's time to go, Sean. And I will say, like, share and subscribe. And as always, bye-bye.